Maybe I'll find what I'm looking for. And they don't find it because it can only be found in Christ. They could stay right at home and pick up a Bible and find everything they're looking for because Christ is the one that satisfies. And there's a restlessness. There's a feeling of emptiness on the part of many, and many times depression and despondency, sometimes caused by drugs. And then there's a sense of guilt, and they don't know where this guilt comes from. And then they have to face decisions, and they can't face decisions. They don't want to make those great lifetime decisions that they have to make. They don't want to be responsible. Many of them are undisciplined. Christ could change all that.
All right, well, my story, before it was our story, really began with me as a young man, teenager, looking for real answers in life. And there was a time growing up on the farm, my dad got sick and died. I had to kind of take over a lot of the duties. But beyond that, really, it was more about the end of the 1960s revolution, the hippie movement, the turn-on drug movement, and I really was looking for answers. And I found myself getting caught up in drugs and that whole subculture of life. And I really thought I was just experimenting with that, only to realize later that it was getting a hold on me, and I really couldn't seem to break out of that cycle. And that was combined with a lot of anger and frustration in my life that I don't even know where it all came from. And it really became a very, very dark time for me. And then one day, my mother had asked me, hey, Billy Graham is on TV tonight. You should watch him. And I thought, I'm not interested in Billy Graham, but for whatever reason, because she would always watch him if he ever came on, and whatever reason, I thought, okay, I'll watch. And it was a night that he had, in 1978, he had a guest on there by the name of B.J. Thomas, who at the time was a famous singer. And he gave his testimony, and he had got himself addicted to drugs, and somebody had invited him to their house, and he knew they were going to talk to him about God and Jesus, and he came very defensively. And I remember him saying, this is the only thing I truly remember for the night, is that he said, when he walked through the door, he said his wife got him to go, and he looked at his neighbor who invited him and said, do not ask me to quit these drugs. I can't do it. And his friend looked at him and said, you don't have to quit the drugs. Jesus will do that for you.
We contacted BJ, and he said, I'd be delighted to come back and tell the folks in the crusade what Christ means to me. Let's welcome B.J. Thomas to our crusade service.
Thank you. As you know, I'm not an evangelist or a preacher or anything. I'm here to just tell you what Jesus Christ has done in my life. As I walked into that house and I saw Micah Reeves, and she had this same glow and this same light around her and her 3 little children, and they looked so happy and they looked so peaceful. And something told me, BJ, here's your way out. Every day as a drug addict, you just die a little more every day. And my family and my friends were just waiting around for me to go. And something told me, BJ, this is your way out. And Jim Reeves began to tell me about the Lord and tell me about Jesus. And I said, now look, Jim, don't ask me to quit the drugs now. Don't even bring that up. And he said, well, you don't have to quit the drugs. And I said, what did you say? And he said, well, that's Jesus' job. That's God's job. He wants to do it for you. He wants to show you grace. He wants to show you mercy. That's why he sent Jesus Christ to die for you.
I went from that program to our little bedroom on the farmhouse, closed the door, and thought, I'm going to pray. But I didn't know how to pray. I didn't pray the prayer with Billy Graham on the program, and I prayed any prayer, quoted any confession, any creed, everything I'd ever memorized in church. I was praying, kneeling by my bed in that bedroom, and I felt like Jesus is here, and he's alive. This isn't religion. He's alive. And something powerful happened in me on the inside that night, and even through the night, I woke up a couple of times with some really unique experiences where I was feeling like dark things were leaving me. And I woke up the next morning and realized it's gone.
That's so powerful.
These addictions were gone, the anger was gone, the hate was gone, and I mean, I had a lot of things to clean up in my life outwardly, but inwardly it was gone. And from that day to this, I've never had to go back. I didn't need treatment. I was just gone. The drugs, all of the anger, everything else was gone. And even my mother saw me the next morning and said, "What happened?" And I said, "What do you mean, what happened?" She said, "You're different." And I said, "What do you mean different?" And she said, "It's your eyes. There's something different in your eyes." And I knew what it was. It was Jesus.
When I was a little girl, I loved going to church. My parents took us to church every week, and I remember when I was in second or third grade, just really loving to go to church and loving God. Well, nothing was ever fostered, and life went on. Got to be a teenager, and my life just took different turns. I was a very outgoing person, and so I wanted to be where my friends were, like all the parties, all the social activities, all the events. I was a cheerleader. I was in gymnastics. I was in forensics. I was in anything that got me out in front of people or with people. And my family moved to Heartland when I was a senior in high school. And I was just troubled. I just was still the party scene with my friends, and I would sneak out to do things that I wasn't supposed to do, and I just was never settled, like, in my life. And I remember one day my brother Jeff, who was a born-again Christian at the time, came home to visit. I was a senior in high school, and he was always talking to us about Jesus, and I thought, oh, he's just like he's a Jesus freak, like, whatever. We weren't raised this way, so how come, you're talking like this now, kind of thing. But something, every time he would talk, I found myself stopping to listen to what he had to say. And one day, it was at midnight, we were all around my mom's table, everyone else had gone to bed, and he said, do you want to accept Jesus as your Savior? And I said, you know what? I really do. I said, I feel like maybe it's something that I'm missing in my life. And so we did. We knelt down in the kitchen of our family house, and he prayed with me to accept Jesus.
Awesome.
Yeah. And but then he went back to where he was living. He didn't live with us. He was older and out of the house. And so after that, I just found myself slipping. I didn't know what to do. I had no direction. I had no church. I didn't want to go back to the same church I was going to. And then I just got right back into to the party scene, wanted to be with my friends. But something was always gnawing me on the inside. Like this, I know this isn't right. In fact, I've heard people say that once you get saved and go back to your old life, it just isn't the same. And so it wasn't the same. It was horrible. Like, I knew everything I was doing was wrong, and but I didn't know what to do. And it was shortly after that, after I graduated from high school, I went to Illinois to be a governess for this rich family, and they were a very non-Christian family. And every time I was trying to walk with God at this point again, and I would open my Bible and read it, and they would criticize me, like, "Oh, you can't have your Bible around here with all, with these kids." And so then I put it away, and I never really brought it back out again until after I finished that stint of being a governess. I moved back home, and my brother called and said, could you, I know you're in transition between jobs and things, and could you come to Marshfield to help us, because Joyce just had a baby, and she had to be hospitalized for like a month. It was a long story, a sickness she had. So that's when I moved to Marshfield, and started going to church at Faith Christian Church in Marshfield. And that's where my journey really began. I really felt like God was calling me to serve there, and I rededicated my life to God. It was amazing. I knew that's where I should be. And once I rededicated my life at that point, that was it. I was not going back, and I never have from that point on.
And I remember feeling like this is what I have to do with my life. I have to tell people about Jesus. And the only format for church that I knew had pastors and missionaries. I'm sure they had more, but that's all I knew. And I was always wild and adventurous, and I thought, well, I'll just tell God I'll volunteer to be the missionary. I thought that'd be the coolest thing. So I remember on our farm, there was some lilac bushes down kind of toward the edge of our yard. And I remember kneeling under one of them and say, Lord, I really feel like you want me to be some kind of a preacher. So I'm very willing to be a missionary. So I'm right. Is that going to work? And I don't remember how I ended the prayer. I didn't expect an answer, but I heard something in my heart that said, no, my people here need a spiritual leader. And I thought, oh.
Are you disappointed?
I was disappointed. I thought, oh no jungles, no canoes into the Amazon, none of that stuff. I'm going to be a pastor. And I realized, okay, that's what I'll do. Transitioning forward, I ended up learning more. There was more to learn, finding groups of Christians that really were following Christ like I was, finding a church, went to Bible school, came back from Bible school to Marshfield, Wisconsin to help with the church, where I became eventually like an assistant pastor. Yeah. And after church, I'd be standing around and, oftentimes people would come up and say, hey, I have a Bible question, or what about this, or need to talk to you about that. And so I love those times, and they'd stand and I'd talk and we would listen and all of that. And usually there was 2, 3, 4 of them. And then they would finish. And I noticed that Doreen, who I barely knew, but she was coming to church, and she'd be standing there. So I'd look at her and go, so do you have a question? No. She just sat there smiling, and I thought,
I just like to hear you talk.
Yeah. So I thought, interesting. She's here, no questions. I thought, oh, well. And so I didn't realize that, she was probably a little more interested than I understood. And I just wasn't getting the cue. I remember looking at my desk one day at the office, and we have these old calendars that were desk calendars with paper, big things you could make notes on each day. And so I'd come in there every other day. There's a new smiley face drawn on my calendar. And I'm thinking, who would be coming into my office and drawing smiley faces?
I cleaned your office.
I know, but I just couldn't figure it out. And then she would stand around and talk after the service and not really have anything to say. And I'm thinking, I'm just not getting this. And then that helped me realize that something else was happening here.
Well, it really all started the day that I started cleaning the church. Like, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be a cleaner. I wanted to help kids. I just wanted to be involved in church. I walked in one day to church, and there you are praying over this map of the world, like just crying over. I'm gonna tear up because it was beautiful. You're just praying over the map of the world, asking God to give you the nations. And it touched my heart so much that I thought, oh my gosh, if I could ever marry somebody like that, that would be amazing. Because I want somebody with a heart like that has a big heart and wants to serve people. And so, but I thought you were married. I thought, oh, he's associate pastor. Oh, he's married. I want somebody just like that. And then as time went on, I thought someone said he's single, and I knew your mom, Marge, and she was amazing. And so I got to talking with her. I didn't know much about you, but I did her. And she said, no, Paula's single. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So as I watched you preach sermons, and not just that, but with people, like you were always willing to serve and help people. And it just drew me to you, and it just made me fall in love with you.
One day, my pastor pulls me aside. He said, Paul, I have a question. I said, what's that? He said, do you ever want to get married? And I said, yeah, I do want to get married. He said, how do you think that's going to happen? And I said, well, I believe that I'm going to serve Jesus and I'm going to follow God. And if I put him first, he's going to bring the right person to me. And I won't have to do this whole dating game, emotional ruckus thing. And he said, suppose he had brought you that right person. And then I thought, oh. And he said, do you think you'd actually have to talk to her? I thought, oh, wow. And he said, I think God may be bringing you that person. And I think it's Doreen. And I thought, oh, well, that explains a lot. That's why she's doing all these things. And I was totally clueless up until that point. And then I realized, I do want to get married. And she's a wonderful candidate, wants to serve Jesus. She's beautiful, everything about her. And that really was my beginning of seeing you in a different light. There's a beautiful park in Marshfield called Wildwood Park.
Yeah.
And it has some wonderful walking trails through the woods. And they're kind of private. And it's just a beautiful setting. And we used to go there, you remember, and we'd go out, maybe we'd get something to eat, and then we would go to the park. And we would walk around, and we would sort of pray and just dream together. And both of us have always been dreamers. We look for what could be more than what is.
Yeah.
And we would walk around the park, and we would talk about ministry stuff. And you would talk about things that you liked, and I would talk about things that I saw. And they were, mind you, what we're doing right now is a very part-time assistant pastor, very little influence, almost no money. I have no clue that there really was going to be a future if you would have looked at it practically for me and or us.
Right.
But I knew God had one. And so we would go to the park and we say, Lord, we want our lives to matter. We want you to do something with us. And we would pray and we would dream. And it was there that so many seeds, I felt like, were dropped in our hearts or maybe sprouted, I don't know. And then we would just kind of tuck it away and leave it with God and go back to our lives.
Pastor Paul knows what's coming, maybe.
Do I?
Got the video of him singing.
Oh, no.
Oh my gosh.
Now the time has come for us to be one. The past can't touch us when it's all gone. Our lives and our gifts will offer up to our King, who can count the harvest that we'll bring. With all of the love the Father has given to me, I'll honor and cherish you and I'll set your heart free.
I loved our wedding day. I remember it was kind of a warm September day. It was actually kind of hot later in the day, but I just remember, walking down the aisle with those beautiful flowers and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this. We're really doing this. But thinking and remembering all of the times that we had prayed and dreamt together and thinking that this is it. This is the day where we're starting our journey. And so many family and friends were there to just to be there to support us.
So we got married. We had all these dreams. We thought God was going to do something great. The whole harvest. Look what God's going to be able to do. And what God really did was I was serving in Marshfield at the church, and a lady from then Elroy, Wisconsin, wrote the church and said, hey, we have been watching your broadcast and we really need a church in our area. There needs to be a life-giving, exciting, I don't know what she used, but we really need a new church in our area. Would you please come and start one? And I remember him reading that letter, looking at me and going, I'm not going to. We got enough to do right here. I'm not going to go start another church. And nobody was ready to start a church. And I said, well, what about like a Bible study or something? He said, why don't you go down there and start a Bible study? And I thought, great, we'll do it. Every Thursday night for a year and a half, Doreen and I would drive down to Elroy. Sometimes your brother Jeff would come along and play the guitar. And we would have a Bible study. The very first one we had was in the city of Elroy at the home of Tony and Sandy Frank. And they were part of a group that the lady who called the church, her name was Debbie Carey, and her and her husband and Cindy Evans was a part of that conversation. Cindy's still a part of our church today. Mm-hmm. And they called the church. And so we made arrangements. Our first Bible study was in their home. There were probably 15, 16 people there. We went from the home. We had met in the community room of the bank in Elroy. Now it's Royal Bank. I don't know what it was called then before. Yeah. And then we would meet in different homes. And every time we went to meet, it was a beautiful spiritual experience. And all the way home to Marshfield, we'd be commenting like, what was it about that? There's something.
Yeah,
there's
we just knew
there.
Something was different.
So that call was a little blip on the radar to our church in Marshfield and our pastor. And to us, it was an opportunity because we were eager to do something for God. And little did we know that that was a tiny little door that we walked through that would turn into so much more.
Yeah.
And those seeds that were planted in our lives way back when in Wildwood Park began to start to grow in that garden in Elroy. We did that about a year and a half, every Thursday, as I recall. Mm-hmm. It's about an hour and a half drive one way. So we would drive for 3 hours, have a Bible study, drive back home, and every week felt the same. And then that period of time, my pastor looked at me and said, you need to decide what you're really going to do. We started to pray, and we realized that what we were feeling when we got done with those Bible studies was really God's call. Yeah. It wasn't something practical. It was just that this is where I want you. Yeah. It was like you're home when you're here. And so we got our group together, and we announced to them that we are willing to come and start a church here if you're willing to be a part of it. And they all said, yes, let's do it. And interesting little topic, and we asked the people, so if we're going to start a church, two things. I said, first of all, Mauston is the county seat, and the county's not all that big and populous. So if we're going to have a church that's really going to reach our area, let's do it there. They were great with that. And then we said, what should we call the church? And well, our church that we came from was Faith Christian Church. Mm-hmm. And so, great, let's call it Faith Christian Church. And that was the time when Faith Christian Church in Marshfield was about to change its name to Believers Church. Yeah. And so they had this big, beautiful sign that they put up on the front of their building that was sitting in storage, which I knew said Faith Christian Church. And we jokingly looked at each other and the people and said, we'll get a free sign out of it if we call it Faith Christian Church.
Well, we had no money, so we had
and sure enough they did. And so we had some people from Marshfield eventually brought that sign down, and we put it up when we got a building. But, we talked about big dreams, and we're coming to a small place. So how it actually started was the church there didn't have a lot of money either. Yeah. And they gave us a check. After I was done, they said, here's a check that you can have to help with your ministry. It was $400. So we left.
Like a decent amount.
Yeah.
Not really.
So we left Marshfield with a check for $400. We had to find a place to live and rent a house. We had to find a place to have a church. We didn't have any equipment for a church. And the only thing I specifically remember, other than getting a house to rent, we rented a tiny little...
for $250 a month.
We rented a house in Grayside Avenue in Mauston for $250 a month. We had to fix it up. It needed all kinds of work. And the only other thing I remember is we bought some baskets to collect an offering because I thought we're going to need offerings. So we're going to be in trouble in a hurry here. And that's how that's what got us there and got us started. So that's how we got to Juneau County, Wisconsin. And it was here, after we got here, our family began. You were pregnant with our first child when we moved here. Mm-hmm. We had 3 others after that. It was here that we bought our first home, which was a real fixer-upper. It was here that our children grew up. Our church began to grow. Our children got married. A lot of our grandchildren are born, still live here today. It was here that all those the seeds of dreams of doing things for God begin to grow. And now we've had the privilege of being here for 4 decades. And we can look back and go, look what God has done. Mm-hmm.